The crystal towers of Nexus Prime reached toward the stars like frozen lightning. Inside the tallest spire, 12 alien species sat around a massive circular table that glowed with soft blue light. This was the Galactic Council, and they had kept peace across known space for 3,000 years. Counselor stood up from his seat. His gray skin looked rough like old stone, and his 6 arms moved as he spoke. He was known for being calm and careful, but today he seemed worried. "My fellow counselors," said, his voice deep and rumbling, "I bring disturbing news from the Outer Rim territories. 7 star systems have gone completely dark in the past month. No communication, no trade ships, nothing." Around the table, other counselors shifted in their seats. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few were made of what looked like living crystal. All of them were much more advanced than the primitive species they sometimes found on new worlds. "Furthermore," continued, "refugee ships are arriving at our border stations. The survivors speak of something they call the Old Hunters. They whisper about creatures from ancient stories, beings that once ruled the stars before disappearing into legend." Counselor Ra of the Hives clicked her mandibles together. It was the sound her species made when they found something funny. "Surely you don't believe such nonsense, old friend. Refugees often create wild stories to explain their troubles." "These are not wild stories," insisted. "The survivors describe the same details: ships that appear from nowhere, technology that seems impossible, and they all mention the same name, humans." The entire council chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Counselor of the Crystalline Collective began to laugh. His body made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "The human myth again," said between laughs. "How many times must we hear these old stories? Every primitive civilization has tales about the mighty humans who once conquered the galaxy before vanishing into space." Other counselors joined in the laughter. They had heard such stories many times before. Young species often told tales about humans, powerful warriors who could adapt to any world, who built weapons that could destroy planets, who moved between stars like gods. But these were just stories, like monsters hiding under a child's bed. "Think logically," said Counselor N of the Aquatic Federation. Her voice bubbled through the water in her breathing suit. "If humans were real, where are they? We have mapped every star system for 1,000 light years in all directions. We have found no trace of this supposed master race." "The stories are all different too," added Counselor N of the Telepathic Union. His large head pulsed with soft purple light. "Some say humans had fur, others say smooth skin. Some describe them as giants, others as small creatures. These tales change with each telling." Shoulders sagged. He had expected this reaction. The other counselors were too comfortable in their power to consider that something might threaten them. But the evidence— "Is there any actual evidence?" interrupted Ra. "Or just frightened refugees telling old stories?" "Pirates," declared firmly. "These attacks are clearly the work of organized pirates. They use fear and superstition to make their victims too scared to fight back effectively." The other counselors nodded in agreement. Pirates were a known problem. They could be dealt with by sending more patrol ships to the Outer Rim. There was no need to worry about mythical warriors from ancient stories. But at the head of the table, Supreme Arbiter remained silent. Her body was made of pure energy, contained in a humanoid shape that glowed like a small star. The ethereal race was the oldest member of the council and had lived for over 2,000 years. She remembered things that the others had forgotten. She remembered the time before the council, when the galaxy was very different. And deep in the council's most secret vaults, she had seen records that were sealed away from all the other members. Records that spoke of a great silence that had fallen across the galaxy exactly 3,000 years ago. Records that described massive battles between unknown forces. Records that mentioned humans not as myths, but as historical fact. "Perhaps we should increase patrols in the affected regions," said quietly. Her voice was like music played on crystal bells. "If these are indeed pirates, we should stop them quickly." "An excellent suggestion," said, grateful for any support. "I volunteer the Third Fleet too." "The Fourth Fleet is closer," Ra interrupted. "They can handle a few pirates easily enough." The counselors quickly moved on to other business trade disputes, territorial boundaries, requests for membership from newly discovered species. They had decided that the problem was minor, and minor problems received minor attention. But could not forget the look in the refugee's eyes. He had seen fear before, but this was different. This was the look of beings who had seen something that broke their understanding of the universe. After the council session ended, floated alone in her private chambers high above the city. Through the transparent walls, she could see the lights of 1,000 different species living together in peace. The council had built something beautiful here. But beauty was fragile and had lived long enough to know that peace never lasted forever. She reached out with her mind and touched the lock on the deepest vault beneath the council building, the lock that had not been opened for 3,000 years. Inside that vault were records that would terrify every member of the council. Records that proved the human myth was not a myth at all. Records that explained why the most advanced civilization in galactic history had suddenly vanished without a trace. They had not been destroyed. They had chosen to leave. And now, if the reports were true, they were coming back. Closed her eyes and tried to remember the exact words from those ancient files. Something about humanity deciding that the other species were not ready for true coexistence. Something about them departing to explore beyond known space. The reports had ended with a single, chilling promise. "We will return when the galaxy has grown enough to stand beside us as equals, or when a threat emerges that requires our intervention." For 3,000 years, the galaxy had been peaceful under council rule, but perhaps that peace had made them weak. Perhaps they had stopped growing, stopped pushing forward, content to manage what they had rather than reach for something greater. And somewhere in the dark between stars, something was stirring, something that would force humanity to keep their ancient promise. The stars looked very cold and distant from the window that night. 3 weeks after the council meeting, strange things began happening across the galaxy. Deep space monitoring stations, floating alone in the void between star systems, started picking up signals that made no sense. Commander Al of the Automated Defense Network stared at his screens in confusion. His species, though, were famous for building the best sensors and computers in known space. But today, their most advanced equipment was showing impossible readings. "Sir," called out technician from across the control room. "Station 77 Alpha is detecting massive gravitational waves coming from beyond the galactic rim." Al's mechanical implants clicked as he processed the information. "How massive?" "The computer says it's equivalent to several million ships moving in perfect formation. But that's impossible, sir. There's nothing out there except empty space." The commander walked over to examine the data himself. The readings were clear and consistent across multiple sensors. Something huge was moving in the darkness beyond their mapped territory, something so large it was bending space itself. "Could it be a natural phenomenon?" he asked. "A cluster of asteroids, perhaps?" Shook her head. "The formation is too organized, sir. And look at this, the gravitational signatures show metal compositions, refined alloys. These readings suggest artificial constructs." "Ships," Al said quietly. "You're saying there are ships out there?" "Yes, sir, thousands of them, maybe millions, all moving toward council space." Similar reports were coming in from monitoring stations across the outer rim. Trade ships that ventured too far from established routes were disappearing without sending distress calls. Exploration vessels sent to investigate the dark zones simply vanished from all tracking systems. Captain K of the merchant vessel Star Wanderer, was one of the few who survived an encounter with the unknown. His ship had been damaged by engine trouble while crossing between systems, forcing him to drift near the galactic edge. "I saw lights in the darkness," he told the investigators afterward. His shell was pale with fear, and his stalked eyes kept darting around the room. Lights where no lights should be. They moved in patterns like a city floating in space. But when I tried to get closer, my ship systems went dead. Everything stopped working. "How did you escape?" asked the investigator. "I didn't do anything. The lights just ignored me, like I wasn't important enough to notice. After an hour, my systems came back online by themselves, and I ran as fast as my engines could carry me." The investigator made notes on his data pad. K was known as a reliable captain with no history of making false reports, but his story was too strange to believe. Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Hun, Dr. Ara was making a discovery that would change everything. The young had spent years studying the ruins left behind by the Titan civilization, one of the oldest advanced species on record. The Titans had been powerful builders who created massive structures across dozens of worlds. But 3,000 years ago, they had suddenly vanished, leaving behind only empty cities and broken monuments. Most researchers believed they had been destroyed by some natural disaster or civil war. Dr. Ara thought differently. She had been excavating a recently discovered Titan facility buried deep beneath Hun's surface. The site was different from other Titan ruins. It had been deliberately sealed and protected, as if someone had wanted to preserve what was inside. After months of careful work, her team broke through into a chamber that had been untouched for. Inside, they found something that made the young archaeologists' hearts race with excitement. A complete Titan data archive, still functional after all these years. "Professor," called her assistant from across the chamber, "you need to see this. The holographic systems are still active." Dr. Ara hurried over to where her assistant was working. Ancient Titan symbols glowed on crystalline displays, and three-dimensional images flickered in the air above them. "Can you activate the translation matrix?" she asked. "Already working on it," replied. His fingers moved quickly over the alien controls. "The language systems are coming online now." Suddenly, the chamber filled with light and sound. Holographic figures appeared in the center of the room, tall, elegant beings that moved with fluid grace. These were the Titans, preserved in their final recordings. But they were not alone. Standing beside them were other figures that made Dr. Ara gasp in recognition. Bipedal beings with smooth skin, hair on their heads, and eyes that seemed to hold both wisdom and sadness. Humans, real humans, not the mythical warriors from ancient stories, but actual people working alongside the Titans as equals. The recording began to speak, its words translated into modern galactic standard. Final archive of the Titan-Human Alliance. Date: 3,000 cycles before the founding of the current Galactic Council. The decision has been made. Humanity will depart known space to explore the regions beyond our galaxy. Dr. Ara could barely breathe as she listened to the ancient recording. "The other species are not ready for true coexistence," the human figure continued. "They still think in terms of dominance and submission, of rulers and subjects. We had hoped to guide them toward something better, but they resist change. The Titans agree that separation is the only path forward." "We will return," the Titan speaker added, "when the galaxy has grown enough to stand beside us as equals, or when a threat emerges that requires our intervention." The recording showed star maps of regions beyond known space, marking the locations of massive construction projects. The words floating beside them made Dr. Ara's blood freeze. Sleeping armadas, deep space fortifications, and preparation zones. "The humans are not gone," the Titan recording continued. "They are waiting, building, growing, becoming something more than what they were. When they return, they will decide whether the galaxy is worth saving." The recording ended, leaving the chamber in darkness once again. Dr. Ara stood in silence for several minutes, trying to process what she had learned. Humans were real. They had been allies with the most advanced civilization in galactic history, and they had not disappeared. They had chosen to leave, promising to return under specific conditions. As if summoned by her discovery, alerts began flooding into the archaeological site's communication systems. Long-range sensors had detected something approaching from deep space, a single vessel of unknown design, moving faster than anything in the Council's databases. The ship appeared to be heading directly for the trade nexus, one of the busiest commercial centers in Council space. Traffic control was trying to establish communication, but the vessel was not responding to any standard hailing frequencies. Dr. Ara looked at the data streaming across her screens and felt a chill run through her entire body. The ship's energy signature matched theoretical models from the Titan Archive's models for human technology that was 3,000 years more advanced than anything the Council possessed. She reached for her communication device with trembling hands. The Council needed to know what she had discovered. They needed to understand that the refugees' stories were not myths or superstition. The old hunters were coming home. As her message raced toward Nexus Prime at the speed of light, the unknown ship continued its approach to Council space. Soon, the galaxy would learn that some legends were more real than anyone had dared to imagine. And in the deepest archives of the Council building, Supreme Arbiter felt the ancient locks on the forbidden vaults trembling, as if the secrets inside were struggling to break free. The unknown ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the trade nexus like a predator stepping out of shadows. Traffic control operators across the massive commercial station stared at their screens in confusion and growing fear. "What in the void is that thing?" whispered Operator, her scaled fingers frozen over her control panel. The vessel was unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was long and sleek, shaped like a blade cutting through space. Its hull was so dark it seemed to absorb light, making it difficult to track visually. Most disturbing of all, their most advanced sensors could barely detect it, as if the ship was somehow hiding from their technology. Station Commander X activated the emergency protocols. He was a veteran of many first contact situations and knew how to handle unknown vessels. "All ships in the area, maintain current positions. Unknown vessel, this is Trade Nexus Control. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." There was no response. The dark ship continued moving toward the station at a steady pace, ignoring all communication attempts. "Try all frequencies," X ordered. "Standard greeting protocols in every language we know." His communications officer worked frantically at her station. "Sir, I'm broadcasting on over 300 channels. No response on any of them." Minutes passed. The unknown ship drew closer to the busy trade routes around the station. Merchant vessels began moving away from its path, their captains nervous about the strange newcomer. Then, without warning, every communication system in the Nexus activated at once. A voice spoke in perfect, ancient galactic standard, the formal language used in the earliest days of interstellar contact. "This sector has been reclaimed. Evacuate immediately or be classified as hostile." The voice was calm and emotionless, but something about it made every being in the control center feel afraid. It was the voice of someone who expected to be obeyed without question. Commander X had served in the Council Defense Force for 40 years. He had faced pirates, rebels, and hostile aliens. He had never backed down from a threat. "Unknown vessel," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "This is Council space, protected by interstellar law. You must identify yourself and submit to inspection." The response came immediately. "You have been warned." That was when the Third Defense Fleet arrived. Admiral commanded 20 of the most advanced warships in Council space. His vessels were armed with quantum torpedoes, particle beam arrays, and deflector shields that could stop anything short of a direct hit from a supernova. The Third Fleet had never lost a battle. "Unknown vessel," Admiral announced on open channels. "You are surrounded. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." For the first time, the alien ship showed some reaction. Strange patterns of light began flowing across its hull, and its shape seemed to shimmer slightly, as if it were not entirely solid. "Scanning the target," reported the Admiral's tactical officer. "Sir, I'm reading. This is impossible." Reports demanded. "The ship appears to be over 2 kilometers long, but its mass readings are inconsistent. Sometimes it shows up as solid matter, sometimes as energy. And sir, I'm not detecting any weapons." The Admiral frowned. A ship that large without visible weapons was either very confident or very stupid. "All ships, maintain formation. Continue scanning for—" His words were cut off as the human ship moved. It didn't accelerate gradually like normal vessels. One moment it was stationary, the next it was moving at impossible speed directly toward the Council fleet. But strangest of all, it seemed to be in multiple places at once, as if reality could not decide exactly where it was. "Evasive maneuvers," Admiral shouted. "All ships scatter formation." The Council ships were fast and maneuverable, but the alien vessel moved like it was dancing through space. It flowed around their formations, passed through their firing solutions, and seemed to predict their movements before they made them. "Open fire," the Admiral commanded. "All weapons." 20 warships unleashed their full firepower. Particle beams that could punch through asteroids, quantum torpedoes that could destroy space stations, and energy blasts that could crack planets, all focused on the single enemy vessel. None of them hit their target. The human ship moved between the energy beams like water flowing around rocks. Torpedoes passed harmlessly through empty space where it had been a split second before. The Council's most powerful weapons might as well have been throwing stones at a ghost. Then the alien vessel finally revealed its own weapons. There were no visible gun ports, no missile tubes, no energy projectors. Instead, space itself seemed to twist around the Council ships. Reality bent and folded, and suddenly 3 of Admiral's vessels simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, erased. One moment they were there, the next they were gone, leaving only empty space behind. "What happened to the fierce dawn?" the Admiral shouted at his tactical officer. I don't know, sir. Sensors show no debris, no energy discharge, no explosion. The ship was just removed." The human vessel continued its deadly dance. More Council ships vanished without a trace. Others found their shields failing as beams of impossible energy passed right through them like they weren't there. Advanced armor that could withstand direct hits from supernovas crumpled like paper. Admiral watched in horror as his entire fleet was methodically dismantled. His ships were not being destroyed in battle. They were being casually brushed aside by technology, so advanced it seemed like magic. "All ships retreat," he finally ordered. "Emergency jump any direction." But when his remaining vessels tried to activate their hyperspace drives, nothing happened. The human ship had somehow disabled their ability to escape. "Sir," his communications officer called out with a shaking voice, "we're receiving another transmission from the alien vessel." "Put it through," the Admiral said quietly. He was a dead man, he knew that now, but maybe he could at least record what was happening so the Council would understand what they faced. The same calm voice spoke across all frequencies. "Your species shows potential, but you lack wisdom. Return to your leaders and deliver this message. Humanity has returned to reclaim what was always ours. The Galactic Council has 72 hours to surrender unconditionally." "Humanity," Admiral whispered, "but you're supposed to be myths." "Myths do not disable your weapons. the voice replied. "Myths do not make your greatest fleet helpless. You have been allowed to survive so you can carry our message. Do not waste this gift." Suddenly, the Council ship systems came back online. Their engines worked again, their communications functioned, their weapons powered up. But the human vessel was already moving away, heading deeper into Council space. Admiral looked around his bridge at his surviving crew. Out of 20 ships, only 5 remained. 15 vessels and their crews had simply vanished, leaving no trace behind. "Set course for Nexus Prime," he ordered quietly. "Maximum speed." As his battered fleet limped toward the Council, the Admiral tried to process what had happened. One ship had destroyed 3/4 of his fleet in less than 4 minutes. One ship had demonstrated technology so far beyond Council capabilities that fighting it was like insects attacking a star. And according to the ancient stories, humans had thousands of such ships. Back at the trade nexus, the dark vessel, which had identified itself as the Revenant, continued broadcasting its message on all frequencies. But now it was not alone. Long-range sensors were detecting more gravitational anomalies approaching from beyond the galactic rim. The surviving refugees from Admiral's fleet carried their desperate warning toward Nexus Prime, racing against time to alert the Council. But even if they arrived safely, would anyone believe them? And in the deepest vaults beneath the Council building, Supreme Arbiter finally reached out and opened the forbidden archives. Ancient files glowed to life, showing records of the last time humanity had demonstrated their power. The files spoke of weapons that could destroy entire star systems, of ships that existed in multiple dimensions at once, of technology that treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions. But most terrifying of all, they spoke of humans who had grown beyond their original nature, becoming something that other species could barely comprehend. The galaxy was about to remember why some legends were better left as stories. And humanity was just getting started. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in 3,000 years of history. Representatives from all 12 species crowded into the crystal chamber, their voices raised in argument and fear. Admiral's surviving ships had just arrived at Nexus Prime, and his report had shaken the Council to its core. "One ship," Supreme Arbiter said quietly, her energy form flickering with stress. "One ship destroyed 15 of our most advanced vessels." "It's impossible," Counselor insisted, his crystalline body pulsing with angry red light. "No single vessel could have such power. There must be some mistake in the report." Admiral stood before the Council, his usually perfect uniform torn and stained. 3 of his 4 arms were in medical supports, and his gray skin looked pale and sick. "I was there," the Admiral said simply. "I watched my ships disappear, not destroyed, erased. Their weapons ignored our shields, passed through our armor like it wasn't there, and they knew our tactics before we used them." "Perhaps it was some kind of new stealth technology," suggested Counselor Ra. "An advanced form of cloaking combined with improved weapons." Had finally opened the forbidden archives, and the truth was far worse than any of them imagined. "It was not stealth," she said, her voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. "Show them the recordings, Admiral." The center of the chamber filled with holographic images from the battle. The Council members watched in growing horror as the human ship moved through space in ways that physics, as their most powerful weapons failed to even scratch its hull, as entire battleships simply vanished from existence. "By the void," whispered Counselor N, "what manner of technology is this?" "Human technology," replied. She gestured, and new images appeared, ancient records from the sealed archives. "This is what we forgot. This is what we chose to ignore for 3,000 years." The archives showed images of massive space battles from the distant past. Human vessels that dwarfed entire fleets, weapons that could crack moons in half, and warriors who had mastered technologies that seemed like magic to other species. The humans were never myths, continued. They were history. Our predecessors made a treaty with them, agreeing that humanity would leave known space until the other species were ready for true partnership. We have spent 3,000 years growing weak and comfortable, while they have been growing strong. How strong? Asked Counselor, though his voice suggested he feared the answer. Strong enough to treat our greatest fleet like children playing with toys, replied. And according to these records, the Revenant is not their most powerful ship. It is merely a scout. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If one scout vessel could destroy most of a council fleet, what could humanity's main force accomplish? We must mobilize everything, declared Counselor Ans. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier, if we combine the full might of all 12 species. It will not be enough, interrupted. But we have no choice. The humans have given us 72 hours to surrender. We cannot accept such terms. What do they want? Asked. What could justify such aggression? They want to reclaim what they consider theirs, the Supreme Arbiter replied. The entire galaxy. Over the next 60 hours, the largest fleet in galactic history assembled at the Seven Suns system, a cluster of stars chosen as the defensive position against humanity's advance. 10,000 warships from every council species formed battle groups that stretched across multiple star systems. They contributed their quantum torpedo fleets. The crystalline collective brought ships that could channel energy from nearby suns. The hive sent swarm vessels that moved like living creatures through space. Every species provided their most advanced technology and their most experienced commanders. Fleet Admiral, the greatest military mind in Council history, stood on the bridge of the massive command ship Unity of Stars. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of his 10,000 vessels, all prepared for the battle that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. All ships report ready, announced his tactical coordinator. Long-range sensors show no sign of the enemy, added the scanning officer. Perhaps they have reconsidered their demands. Admiral was not so optimistic. He had studied the recordings of the Revenant's attack, and everything about human tactics suggested careful planning and overwhelming force. They would not make demands they could not back up. Maintain full alert status, he ordered. They will come. The deadline expired at exactly 72 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds after the human ultimatum had been delivered. That was when the stars began to go dark. Sir, the scanning officer called out, his voice tight with fear. I'm reading massive gravitational disturbances across all sensor grids. Show me, the Admiral demanded. The main display shifted to show long-range sensor data. Across the entire outer edge of the Seven Suns system, space itself seemed to be bending and twisting. Massive shadows were blotting out the light from distant stars. How many ships? Asked quietly. The scanning officer's hands shook as he worked his controls. Computer estimates. Over 50,000 vessels, sir, and they're all larger than our biggest battleships. The human armada emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Ship after ship materialized from the void, each one a masterpiece of engineering that made the Council's best vessels look like primitive shuttles. They moved with mathematical precision, creating geometric patterns that stretched across the entire star system. But it was not just their numbers that broke the spirits of the Council fleet. It was their size. The smallest human vessels were larger than Council battleships. The largest were so massive they had their own gravitational fields, bending light around them like artificial black holes. By all the gods of all the worlds, whispered someone on the bridge. Admiral tried to maintain his composure, but even he felt his confidence crumbling. The human fleet was not just larger than his own. It was so much larger that fighting them would be like insects attacking mountains. All ships, he announced on fleet-wide communications, maintain formation. Prepare for. The human attack began without warning or announcement. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration of technological superiority, so complete it bordered on casual cruelty. Council ships found their weapons simply refused to fire. Their targeting system showed clear locks on enemy vessels, but when they pressed the firing controls, nothing happened. Their most advanced computers had been turned against them without anyone even touching them. Meanwhile, the human weapons operated with surgical precision. Council vessels did not explode or burn. They were simply and efficiently disabled. Their engines stopped working, their life support systems shut down to minimum levels, and their crews found themselves unable to operate any critical systems. The few ships that did manage to fire their weapons watched in despair, as their most powerful attacks harmlessly dissipated against human shields that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Energy beams that could destroy planets simply vanished when they touched the strange barriers protecting the human fleet. And through it all, the human ships moved like they were dancing. They flowed through the council formations with impossible grace, their movements coordinated down to the smallest detail. It was like watching a single enormous organism with 50,000 parts working in perfect harmony. Admiral watched his life's work crumble around him. 10,000 ships, representing the combined military might of 12 advanced civilizations, had been reduced to helpless scrap in less than 20 minutes. Not destroyed, disabled. The humans were making a point. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the enemy fleet." "Put it through," the admiral said quietly. A new voice spoke across all frequencies, different from the revenant commander, but carrying the same calm authority. "Council forces, this demonstration is complete. You have seen the gap between our capabilities and yours. Further resistance will be considered an act of aggression against the returning government of this galaxy." The voice paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. "Supreme Arbiter, you are requested to attend a meeting aboard our flagship. You will not be harmed, and you will be returned to your people when our discussion is complete." Monitoring the battle from her private ship at the edge of the fleet, felt something she had not experienced in 2,000 years: complete helplessness. The humans had just demonstrated that they could have destroyed every council ship in the system, but had chosen mercy instead. "I will come," she replied simply. As her shuttle approached the human flagship, got her first close look at human engineering. The ship was beautiful in a way that description, all flowing lines and surfaces that seemed to bend light itself. It was larger than most space stations, but moved with the grace of a living creature. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had spent 3,000 years becoming something far beyond what they had been when they left. And this demonstration of power was only the beginning. In the disabled council ships floating helplessly around the Seven Suns, millions of crew members stared out their windows at the human fleet and finally understood what their ancestors had forgotten. Some legends were warnings disguised as stories. And some warnings should have been heeded. Supreme Arbiter floated through the corridors of the human flagship Prometheus Ascendant, and what she saw challenged everything she thought she knew about starship design. The walls seemed to be made of flowing metal that shifted color as she passed. Gravity worked differently here. She could walk on any surface simply by thinking about it, and the air itself felt alive with energy. Her escort was a human woman in a simple black uniform marked only with silver stars. She was tall and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the universe. Her hair was dark, her skin was brown, and her eyes held depths that suggested she had seen things beyond the understanding of other species. "I am Admiral Sarah," the woman said as they walked. "I command this vessel in the Pacific Fleet. You may call me Sarah if you prefer." Studied the human carefully. She had expected warriors drunk on victory, conquerors ready to claim their prize. Instead, she found someone who seemed almost sad. "You are not what I expected," the ethereal admitted. "Neither is this situation," Sarah replied. "We had hoped to find a galaxy that had grown during our absence. Instead, we found one that had become comfortable with mediocrity." They entered a vast chamber at the heart of the ship. The room was circular, with walls that showed real-time images of space outside. But more impressive were the three-dimensional displays floating in the air, showing star maps that extended far beyond the boundaries of Council space. "Welcome to our navigation center," Sarah said. "From here, we coordinate the movements of our exploration fleets across multiple galaxies." "Multiple galaxies?" asked in surprise. "We have spent 3,000 years expanding beyond the limits of known space," Sarah explained. "We have visited the Andromeda Galaxy, the clouds, and regions so distant that your people do not even have names for them." The star maps showed the incredible scope of human exploration. Thousands of systems marked in blue indicated human colonies. Green markers showed allied species they had encountered and befriended. Yellow areas marked regions under exploration. But it was the red zones that made feel cold despite her energy form. Vast areas of space marked with warnings in multiple languages. Hostile contact, contaminated zone, extreme threat level. "What are the red areas?" she asked. Sarah's expression darkened. "The reason we returned." She gestured, and the display zoomed in on one of the red zones. The images that appeared made recoil in horror. Ships that looked like they were made from organic matter, planets stripped bare of all life, and massive structures that seemed to bend reality around themselves. 300 years ago, our exploration fleets made contact with something we call the Hunger, Sarah continued. It is not a single species, but a collective consciousness that consumes entire civilizations. It grows stronger by absorbing other forms of life, and it has been moving toward this galaxy for centuries. The display showed the projected path of the Hunger's advance, could see that it would reach Council space within a single lifetime. "Why did you not warn us?" she asked. "We tried," Sarah replied sadly. "We sent messages, but your people dismissed them as myths or pranks. We sent ambassadors, but they were turned away without being heard. The Council had decided that humans were extinct and refused to consider evidence to the contrary." Sarah walked over to another display showing images of the recent battle. "We did not want to return as conquerors. We wanted to return as allies, but you forced our hand. So you destroyed our fleet to prove your strength." "We disabled your fleet to demonstrate the gap between what you are and what you need to become," Sarah corrected. "Every ship in your armada can be repaired. Every crew member will return safely to their families. We killed no one who did not force us to defend ourselves." Thought about Admiral's report. Even in the heat of battle, the humans had gone out of their way to avoid unnecessary casualties. They could have destroyed every Council ship instantly, but had chosen to disable them instead. "What do you want from us?" she asked. Sarah gestured to a massive wall display that showed the entire galaxy. Council space was marked in blue, but it was a tiny fraction of the total map. Most of the galaxy was marked in gray, unexplored, or abandoned. "We want to prepare you for what is coming," Sarah said. "The Hunger will arrive within the next century. When it does, it will not care about your territorial boundaries or political systems. It will consume everything it finds unless we are ready to stop it." "How do we prepare for such a threat?" "By growing beyond what you are now," Sarah replied. "Your species have become stagnant, content to manage what you have rather than reach for what you could become. You need to advance your technology, expand your thinking, and learn to work together as one united force." The display changed to show images of human colonies on distant worlds. Saw cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants, mining operations that harvested energy directly from stars, and space habitats that housed billions of beings in perfect harmony. "We will help you," Sarah continued. We will share our knowledge, guide your development, and teach you what we have learned in our travels, but you must be willing to change. And if we refuse? Sarah's expression became very serious. Then we will establish quarantine zones around your territories and defend them as best we can when the hunger arrives, but we will not force you to accept our help. The offer was unprecedented. A civilization with the power to conquer the entire galaxy was instead offering partnership and guidance. It was more than had dared hope for when she had seen the human fleet approaching. "What about the Council?" she asked. "What about our government?" The Council structure was designed to manage existing territories, not to unite the galaxy against an existential threat, Sarah explained. It will need to be replaced with something more effective, but the choice of what that replacement looks like will be up to all our species working together. Over the following days, representatives from every council species visited human ships to see firsthand what 3,000 years of advancement looked like. They saw medical technology that could regrow entire organs, manufacturing systems that could build anything from pure energy, and transportation networks that could move between galaxies in hours instead of centuries. But more importantly, they met humans who had evolved beyond their original nature. The crew of the Prometheus Ascendant included beings who could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, others who had merged their consciousness with artificial intelligence, and some who had learned to manipulate matter at the molecular level with just their thoughts. "We are not the same species that left 3,000 years ago," Admiral explained to a gathering of council leaders. "We have encountered other forms of life so advanced that they challenged our understanding of what it means to be sentient. We have faced horrors that would break the minds of those who are unprepared. And we have learned that survival requires constant growth and adaptation." The transformation of galactic civilization began immediately. Human construction ships, each one larger than an entire council fleet, started building defensive installations around every inhabited system. Advanced automated factories established production centers that could manufacture anything the coming war might require. But the most important changes were not technological. Human teachers worked with alien students to expand their understanding of physics, philosophy, and the nature of consciousness itself. They shared techniques for accelerated learning, methods for enhancing natural abilities, and ways to think beyond the limitations that had held the council species back. Some resisted the changes. Counselor led a faction that wanted to maintain the old ways, arguing that the human threat was exaggerated. But their numbers dwindled as more and more beings saw the evidence of what was approaching from beyond the galactic rim. Dr. Ara became one of the first non-humans to undergo the enhancement process that would allow her to work with human technology. The young archaeologist had volunteered to help establish communication networks across the galaxy, and she needed to upgrade her mental capacity to handle the vast amounts of information involved. "It doesn't hurt," she explained to her worried colleagues after the procedure. "It's like suddenly being able to see colors that you never knew existed. I can understand concepts that would have taken me years to learn before." Within months, similar volunteer programs were established on every council world. Beings who chose enhancement could work directly with human technology, serving as bridges between the advanced systems and their less developed populations. Admiral stood on the observation deck of her flagship, looking out at a sight that would have been impossible just a year earlier. Human and alien crews worked together on construction projects that spanned entire star systems. Ships designed by multiple species flew in mixed formations, their crews learning from each other and sharing their unique perspectives. "How long until the hunger arrives?" asked, who now served as the liaison between the human fleet and the former council species. "Our best estimates suggest 70 to 90 years, Sarah replied. "Enough time to prepare if we use it wisely." "Will it be enough?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time since her return to the galaxy, it was a smile of genuine hope rather than grim determination. Look around you. 6 months ago, your species were content to manage a small fraction of this galaxy. Today, they are building defenses that span multiple star clusters. 6 months ago, they had never worked together on anything larger than trade agreements. Today, they are unified in a common purpose. She gestured toward the construction projects visible through the transparent walls. The hunger has consumed countless civilizations because it always found them divided and weak. But when it arrives here, it will find something that has never existed before, a truly united galaxy, armed with technology it cannot comprehend, and defended by beings who have learned to grow beyond their original limitations. In the distance, alien children played in the gardens of New Nexus, the capital world of the unified galactic government. Human and non-human youngsters learned together, their minds enhanced by technology that allowed them to grasp concepts that would have been impossible for their parents to understand. Above them, the protective silhouettes of human warships stood eternal guard against the dark between the stars. But they were no longer alone. Ships designed by 12 different species flew alongside them, their crews united in purpose and strengthened by shared knowledge. The galaxy had learned to grow again. And when the hunger finally arrived, it would discover that some prey had evolved into predators more dangerous than anything it had ever encountered. The age of humanity's return had begun. The age of galactic unity would follow. And in the darkness beyond the stars, an ancient evil would learn that legends sometimes became nightmares for those who thought themselves hunters. The universe was about to become a much more dangerous place for those who fed on the weak.